All right, we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Rosen, email marketing coordinator at Meetup. And today we're joined by special guest Maxwell Morrongiello, head organizer for non-scene gay friends of Greater Boston Meetup Group, and Doug Meil, founder and co-organizer of the Cleveland Big Data Meetup Group. They'll discuss how they've grown their groups and maintained engagement through the pandemic. You'll learn the different tricks they use to encourage event attendance to keep their members engaged during and in between events, and how they've managed to meet in person safely.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here, guys. So I will first start by introducing Max. Maxwell Morrongiello is the head organizer for the non-scene gay friends of Greater Boston Meetup. Max is currently pursuing his bachelor degree in political science with a concentration in public administration at Bridgewater State University. Max is a mental health advocate, student activist, community college commencement speaker, and Truman Scholar finalist. After a youth spent overcoming anxiety, Asperger's syndrome, and social orchestration, Max flourished to become an advocate with Boston's LGBTQ community. Some of Max's favorite social activities include karaoke, board games, laser tags, and visiting corn mazes. Thank you so much for joining us, Max.
Thanks again. It's a pleasure.
And we also have Doug Neal. He is the data enthusiast and portfolio architect at Undata. Doug is also the founder and co-organizer of the Cleveland Big Data Meetup Group. Since 2010, members of Cleveland Big Data have been meeting to discuss complex data problems wherever they arise, from managing data management and analytics to reporting, networking, and security. Thank you so much for joining us, Doug.
Thank you.
All right, so before we get into our questions, I'm just going to go over some guidelines and the agenda. This event will be recorded. You will not appear in the video. We ask you to please mute your audio during the event as a courtesy. All questions can be submitted in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and closed captioning is available. To turn it on, click on the live transcript icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preference. We did our introductions already, and then we are going to go into a 40-minute panel with Max and Doug. And then at the last 15 minutes, we'll open the floor for a Q&A session. All right. So I'm really excited to dive into this and get to know you guys better. So I'm going to start with learning more about how you as an organizer organize your group, and how long you've been organizing them, and what made you become an organizer. Max, do you want to start for us?
Yeah, so I've actually been a member of my group around since when it started, but I didn't really play an active role until the last 2 years when I saw that the previous organizer stepped down, and I thought, oh, this is a great way to meet new people. And so I took it over. And we have, right now we have my group has over 8,000 people in the Boston area. And we do a lot of fun events in the LGBTQ community, whether it's karaoke, game nights, just fun things that I kind of like to do and that kind of thing. And I think that it's just a great way to meet new people, and that's what I enjoy doing. So
exciting. How did you take over your group? Was that intimidating? Were you asked to do that? Did you step up yourself?
No, the previous organizer wasn't very active. They would kind of just sort of let it die in the doldrums, and I just got an email saying the previous organizer stepped down. They didn't ask me, and I thought, go for it. This is a great way to, I just thought it was a good opportunity, and I wanted to get engaged. And so I jumped right in.
Awesome, that's so amazing. Doug, do you want to tell us a little bit about your group and what you do as an organizer?
Sure thing. So I started Cleveland Big Data in 2010. At the time, I was at a startup, and I was traveling a bit from different big data conferences in San Francisco and New York, and I basically, it was out of envy. I wanted some of that in my own hometown. So I started that meetup in 2010, and then kind of modeled it off of both some of the meetups that I had seen, some of the tech meetups that I had seen in other cities, as well as also TED Talks. And we can get into that later, but yeah, it's a labor of love.
Awesome. And how many members are currently in your group?
So yeah, there's around 3,600 right now. The meeting cadence is a meeting every other month. It's a presentation style. So it's a little different than a social meetup. It's just different purpose, that's all. But it meets every other month for tech presentations and discussions.
Awesome. And so I'm going to jump into, how do you think that the pandemic has affected you hosting events for your group? We'll start with Doug, considering that you just said that you have a set time that you guys meet every month. So has that affected anything?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we got into a meeting cadence many years ago, of meeting every other month. That seemed to be about the right amount of content for people to absorb, as well as also for speakers to prepare, as well as also for attendees. And so as a general recommendation for organizers is just try to find the balance that works for you. For my group, it happens to be every other month, but for other groups, it could be different, but just find that balance and consistency. So the typical meetup would be, we'd have free pizza that we'd find a sponsor from 5:15 to 6 p.m. on a particular Monday, eat, talk, be merry, network, and then get into the sessions from roughly 6 to 7:15. And so unfortunately, when the pandemic came, the in-person meetups were out. The pizza, unfortunately, was out. Fortunately, we did at least have technology, so we could at least do virtual meetups. So the group is still going. But I have to say, we're still struggling with bringing people back in person. There's just a big inertia for people being at home in Zoom. And I do think it's worth fighting for, because I do think that there's a consensus in the group that everyone misses in person. It's just a question of, when does everybody feel safe? Does that make sense?
Definitely. So currently you guys are still meeting online?
Still meeting, but it's all hybrid. I did try one hybrid event. I'm sorry, it's all virtual. I did try one hybrid event in September. I had 3 people show up in person. So I had a good crowd online. But we had 3 in person. I think we're going to try another hybrid again in January, and then try to slowly phase them back in.
It sounds like a good plan. Maxwell, how is your group doing? Are you guys currently meeting in person, online? Are you doing hybrid events as well? And how are those working for you guys?
So right now we're about doing 2/3 of our events in person and another third online. We've had a lot of success. We recently just had a puzzles and cheeseburgers event where we do puzzles and eat cheeseburgers. And we had about 27 people for that. And it was a big success. But I think, we still have to be careful and take precautions and that kind of thing. So I think having online events, especially for people who are vulnerable, is important. I think that, I think people are really hungry right now for social interaction coming out of the pandemic. I think being able to provide opportunities during the pandemic for people to socialize is really helpful for people, because they need that interaction. Now what we find is, we might have an online event and then people meet in person after the online event. So it's sort of like a gateway to meeting in person. So I think that we have a lot of events online. We had during the pandemic, we had speed friending, karaoke, virtual, a lot of virtual Jackbox games, that kind of stuff. And now that we're in person, we're doing a lot of sort of movies, we went strawberry picking, just things that I find fun is what we kind of like to do. Yeah.
Awesome. Have you found anything or done anything to help you grow your group? Have you found any specific strategy? Max, we'll start with you since you kind of rolled into, specific events that you find fun. I think that definitely could be a key to helping, expand your group.
Yeah, so I found a lot of time, if you have an event that, so when you have events now in your group in general, you have certain tags that you can use to sort of make Meetup know, oh, when people search for your event, this is what I'm looking for. And so you really need to optimize your page and your event to have those tags. And if you do that well, when Meetup sends out their emails for like their newsletters, it'll target people who, you include your event in their newsletters. And so I've run a lot of sort of the Meetup naturally that way. I've experimented, one thing that's interesting, I didn't really do a lot of this with paid advertising. I haven't done a lot of it, but I found that you have a member list you could download in your in the members section of your group. If you download that list, you could actually retarget to your audience members through Facebook, through their custom audiences feature. You could upload the list to Facebook and target to people's names and the towns they live in. You might have to clean up the data, and it'll actually target those people so you can actually reach out to them again and get those people back into your events.
That's awesome. So you mentioned something about keywords in your Facebook plugs.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you find successful for marketing your events and groups?
So yeah, the keywords is within Meetup. It's sort of a new feature, or for at least for the events, but it's very helpful in terms of getting people to find your events through sort of Meetup's emails and Meetup's search function when people look for events.
And Doug, what is something you have found successful for growing your group?
So the Meetup for the up until the pandemic was 100% in person, and there was no video streaming. So it very much relied on human relations. Does that make sense? Like it was all local. And so one of the things as a Meetup organizer I relied on were amplifiers, so to speak. And so both at a corporate level as well as also at a university level, contacts within certain organizations at multiple levels that could help get the message out. So yes, there was also social media, the Facebook and LinkedIn and things like that, and a lot of emails, but having those human repeaters and just giving a few shout outs to the organizations that have supported us for so long, like Progressive Insurance is headquartered in Cleveland. They've been a great partner for years. KeyBank and NASA Glenn Research Center. And then for university level, we've had great relations with Case Western Reserve University, Kent State, and then also Cleveland State. And so having friends in multiple places and at multiple levels who can help do the the people rounding for you, so that as a Meetup organizer, you're not doing all of that yourself.
That's great. So you guys shared how you guys promote your events and things that you find help make your group successful. Are you guys hosting events? You guys are hosting events right now in person and hybrid. How do you encourage people to attend these events? Let's start with Doug.
So believe it or not, even though it's easier to attend a Meetup now, attendance is actually down relative to when we were meeting in person. Now it does have the advantage of the Meetups are recorded, and so they're posted on a YouTube channel. I also have to give thanks for the Linux Foundation, because they've loaned us their corporate Zoom account, which has more attendees, and they're also posting the Meetup content on the Linux Foundation YouTube channel. And so I don't know if it's a combination of just Zoom burnout, or people say, it's recorded, so I'll watch it later. So we've had decent attendance, but we actually were having more people attend in person pre-pandemic. So I don't have any magic on this one. Yeah, it seems like with the technology that we'd have more people attending during the meetups, but we actually have less than less than the before there was a pandemic. So I just know that as a meetup organizer, I just need to keep going. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is just stopping and saying, I'll get back to the schedule, when everything settles down, because then the meetup will be dead by then. Yeah, it's crazy times. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing a great job trying to keep your members engaged, and I feel like your set schedule might help people. So that's definitely a great thing that you're doing. Max, what about you?
Yeah, so I think first you got to get people to attend, and sometimes I'll RSVP, and sometimes I'll send out a personal email, like a short, very short, try to keep a short email just to our membership list, because people seem to respond more to a personal email than to just a generic Meetup email blast from Meetup. So I always have a personal email, like, once a month or something, listing all the events really short so people read it and don't skip over it. And then when people do RSVP to the event, the night before the event or the day before the event, 24 hours before, I'll send a reminder email. They already get one from Meetup, but a nice personal touch. And I always try to make it sound like it's coming from me, like just to them, say, hey, how are you doing? Like it's just to them. And so, but really it's going out to the whole group. And so, and I'll send that out to people to remind them about the upcoming event. And then the other thing you have to ask, sometimes it matters. Sometimes it doesn't matter if, usually about half of the people who sign up to our events show. And sometimes it doesn't really matter. We expect that. If there's a case where we need, like we have a reservation and we need us to make for a certain number of people, we'll charge a small, like a nominal, like $5 reservation fee. And we'll have them keep it, we'll refund it if it's before when we make the reservation. And if it's after when we make the reservation, we'll say, well, we'll give it, you could refund it, but only if someone takes your place. So that way people always have an incentive to keep their RSVP current. Sorry if that's confusing, but basically people need to have skin in the game in order to keep their RSVP current. And that we've had a lot of success doing that when we make reservations.
Yeah. So is there any other social platforms that you guys use to promote your events?
So we do have a Facebook page. We're not very active on Instagram. I need a good marketing team, but I'm working on it.
So Doug, I know I want to get into a little bit. Last week when we spoke, you mentioned how you leverage your LinkedIn profile to get attendees for your event. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Well, just using that, posting the events. And I agree with what Max was saying about the personal email sent out to the group. That's a great technique. I developed a reputation for some seriously bad nerd humor, just to make sure that people would take the time to read the email. It's great advice of make sure it's personal, make sure it's witty and worth reading. Yeah, it's great advice. But basically, a lot of emails sent from the Meetup account.
How often would you say that you guys email your groups?
Hopefully not so much that I annoy them. That's a great question. So you want to send enough to get their attention, but not one email more.
Yeah. I know it's a hard balance to find that point of being too nudgy to annoying.
Yep.
So I'd love to hear if you guys have found any number that works for you guys, or if any group members have pulled you aside and said, hey, you might want to slow down on communications or add communications. So any tips, I'm sure everyone would love to hear.
I usually try to hit event once, or I usually schedule events 3 weeks in advance. I don't have a fixed schedule, so usually, if there's a bunch of them, I'll try to knock them off, and I'll have hyperlinks to the events so that they could just click on the link if they want to look up more information.
Mhm.
So usually just, I'll try to hit each group maybe once every 3 weeks. I'll send out an email to the entire membership. In terms of the event, it's specific on when that event is. The other thing too that's helpful is to, if you have the time, you don't have to do this, but when people come to your event, thanking them for coming individually after they come, with their name, can go a long way. Like I said, not all of us have the time to do that, but it's something that could be helpful. And also reaching out to people who haven't been in your group for a while, because you could go through the member list and actually see when the last attendance is and how many events they attended, and do that.
Now, do you have, an email that you guys send out to people who haven't attended for a while, or do you check in with them?
So I usually do most of my messaging through Meetup. To have a second email, we do have like a Gmail account that sometimes we use, but mostly send stuff through Meetup.
Yep.
And just try to keep, touch base with people that way.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen an instance where, someone hasn't shown up for a couple months, and have you noticed reaching out to them re-engages them and brings them back?
I think they definitely care. They definitely, they'll say, they just have a lot of stuff going on, COVID, so it's usually personal. And so, when that happens, you usually just gotta, it's not about us, but they do appreciate it and they do remember you. And it does, in addition to, it's not just about the group, it's about the community.
Yeah.
So if you foster a sense of community that you're cared for, that's important as well. The other thing I might add, this is kind of a tangent, in Zoom, when you register events, in terms of keeping track of attendance, always enable the registration feature and collect, people's name and email, just so that when you go through the attendance list on Meetup, you check all the people off who are actually there.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And with that, I kind of want to go into a little bit about attendance. Since you said you do track attendees and you cross-check your list, what happens if people don't show up, and how do you manage your attendance? Let's start with Doug.
So this is actually related. I need to answer this. I need to step back just a half step.
Sure.
So Cleveland Big Data has never charged any fees, and every event is that I either get a free room, either from a university or a corporate sponsor, or or someone is another organization is picking up the pizza. And this actually relates to Max's great comment on thanking people. Oh, thank you. Every meeting is, thank you for so-and-so for picking up, sponsoring the pizza. Thank you for the company for letting us the room. Thanks for this. It's so simple, and it goes a long way. And so with that, attendance, like keeping strict attendance, has really not been a priority. Like, you could show up in a Big Bird outfit, I don't care. I mean, as long as you're gonna be polite and sit, not, ask good questions, like, that's fine. Like, your identity is safe with me. So I only care as much as I know roughly how much pizza to order. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
For me, it doesn't matter that much either. There was one event I hosted, I was supposed to get like 6 people. It was a small event. I worry a little bit because I hosted an event and no one showed up, and that's like a lot on me. And you don't want that to happen. But if you know that you're gonna have a good number, at least half are going to show up, and you're going to get some people. Sometimes it doesn't matter. But if it does, then that's when we charge, and that little bit makes us know that you're actually interested in coming. And so we haven't had many instances where we had to worry. And if we did, we would say, well, if you have a history of not showing up, you might be moved to a wait list before someone else. You might be deprioritized, kind of like T-Mobile or something. But that we don't do that. We don't have that situation very often.
For these events that you require a deposit, what happens if, 15 or 20 days before they say, I'm sorry, Max, I can't make it anymore?
That's fine. I mean, if we haven't made the reservation yet, I'll give, they can get a refund, and I might subtract. PayPal has a fee, unfortunately, that they don't give me back. So I might subtract that. But other than that, I'll give the refund. If I already made the reservation, the rule is, and usually I make it like right a few days before or something, but if I already made the reservation and like adjusted it or can't adjust it anymore, I'll say, okay, well, I'll refund you if someone else takes your place. So you could cap how many people could sign up per event. So I'll leave the RSVPs open, and they'll be removed. So let's say there was 12 people and now there's 11. So now a 12th person could still join and take the spot and pay the deposit. And then the previous person could get that money back once that person joins. That's kind of complicated, but
yeah, but at least
it gives them an incentive to at least tell us that they can't come, so we can, let the parties know.
Doug, you mentioned sponsorships that you've received. How have you gone about finding these opportunities?
So the cadence for meetups has been, I've had 5 just regular meetups a year, and then I've had for the last, since at least from 2014 to 2019, I had 1 mega meetup. That was a big blowout, and so the sponsorship conversations are specific to those. So for regular meetups, it's really talking about pizza. And so you can usually find especially in the tech world, a tech organization that is willing to, hey, can we come in to do a presentation, and we'll buy the pizza. And my employer wouldn't mind doing that, and other local organizations wouldn't mind doing it, especially also tech companies. So it's a little easier in the tech world. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easier, especially if they know that they're getting in front of 50 to 100 or 150 nerds. It's pretty easy to justify. So the mega meetup was a much larger endeavor, because that involves several hundred people and a multi-$1,000 budget. But for regular meetups, just getting a couple $100s of pizza money is not that. It's not a tall order.
So are some of these people that you've reached out to, are they, past contacts of you or your meetup group, or do you ask, anyone in your group if they have, specific contacts at these tech companies that would be interested to sponsor?
Oh, so yeah, all of the above, especially for tech organizations that are working with local companies that are interested in doing a talk, so it's all of the above. It's friends of friends, it's friends of colleagues, it's vendors of colleagues of friends. It's all the above.
It's great.
Would you like to sponsor a pizza? I'll take sponsorships anywhere.
I'd love to sponsor pizza. We'll connect after this. So we've talked about how, incentives can increase attendance, and Doug, you've said pizza or food is definitely something that incentivizes people. Have you found any other incentives that work? Max?
Well, I think you ultimately have to have an event that people want to go to. So if you have incentive, you can have all the incentives you want. If it's an event that people aren't interested in, they're not going to come. And so I think you really have to think about, what do people want? Ask them what they want, what kind of events they want, but also be true to yourself, because a lot of people want certain events that I don't want to run. So I do events I want to run and hope people come, and people do come, because I like to do fun things, I guess. I don't know. I hope I like to do it. So we do. I think ultimately you have to make sure that you're offering something that people want to do.
And how do you figure out what your group members are looking for? Do you send surveys, or do you ask them at your event, or do you have like a pre-meeting before you plan stuff?
So I did do a survey. I do ask people at the events a lot, probably too much. People are like, stop talking to me. I just want to enjoy the event. But I think I did just recently start sort of like a community forum event, which is kind of not a typical meetup, but just to kind of get people's feedback and stuff and build a sense of community. I'm not sure how that's going to work. We'll find out. But I think ultimately the formula of just doing fun things has worked so far. So we haven't had to, and I have some upper organizers who've helped me with my group. And so between us, we sort of come up with different things. And the thing is, if you find one thing that works, you start doing variations of it. So originally I ran a speed dating event and people said, well, I don't want to date. I just want to make friends. And there's too much pressure with speed dating. So we did a speed friending event instead of a speed dating event. And then people said, it's kind of hard meeting in groups of one-on-one. Like if there's a lot of pressure, what if we had a group of 3? And so we did breakout rooms in Zoom in groups of 3. And that ended up being an even bigger hit than the speed dating was. And that's how that kind of evolved as we did sort of variations over time.
That's amazing, especially like you said, it's hard to meet people, and finding these connections after these last difficult year. So it's a super interesting event. I would have attended. So we talked about getting people to attend your events. You guys have great turnouts. Oh, I'm sorry, Doug.
I did have I did a comment on incentives. So pizza obviously is a big one, but the ultimate one is really about the people come for the technical content, and for at least for technical meetups, and content is king. So the advice that I've had, the guidance for speakers is come to educate, not sell. And that's a big difference in the tech world. And so, come to educate, have a good story, impart some experiences and wisdom. The other thing is I use a strict 20-minute timer. I have unfortunately, I forgot to bring it for this, but I have a old crappy kitchen timer that I bring, and that's the shtick. And I put that right on the on the podium, and so everybody knows, and it beeps and it's over. And when it beeps, that's it. Like when your 20 minutes is up, it's the next speaker. And that capping of time is respectful of both speakers as well as also the audience, because the audience knows you're going to start on time, you're respecting their time, you're going to manage it, and then you're going to end on time, and then people can go home. And there's also nothing worse than being the next speaker behind someone that's taking Q&A and it just won't shut up. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's respectful for the speakers, it's respectful for the audience. And so, yeah, content's king, and then time is the ultimate resource. So, use it wisely.
Definitely. So we talked about getting people to attend your events, and you have a great turnout. Now that they're there, how do you maintain engagement during your event? Let's start with Doug.
So during the event, because this is a presentation, it's actually pretty easy. It's the kitchen timer, right? I'm the guy who basically is doing both, acting as the MC as well as also giving the speaker a heads up. Hey, you're at 10 minutes. Hey, you got 5 minutes left. And then I'm sorry, thank you for speaking again. Max's point, thank you for speaking. And then we're going on to our next speaker, and then keeping the meetup moving. Again, that's the engagement is just making sure that things don't run over. Does that make sense? Because then you start losing people.
And do you think that is also the secret sauce that has people coming back? The fact that you respect their time and they're engaging?
I've had more compliments about that, of thank you. It's a weird thing to say, but I've had more people say thank you for starting and ending on time than anything else. Yeah, especially for a professional-ish tech type meetup. Like that's that's the that's the expectation.
Awesome. And Max, for you, what do you think, helps you keep engagement up during an event? I know you guys do some really fun activities, so that's kind of nice when you know what you're getting into.
Well, it's been a little bit of a process for me. I've always struggled with awkward silence. So when we've had online Zoom meetings, I always felt like I had to engage people. And I've had to learn that when you pull back, sometimes people are able to socialize and then build stuff that they built a community structure that wouldn't have existed had you kept trying to engage them. And so sometimes the best thing in a social environment is to just sort of step back. And I found that, especially when we've had in-person events, that there's a whole sort of organism existing outside of me that I don't actually have to be there. I actually had an event. I had a family illness, and I had to. It's okay, but I actually had to step back from an event. But the event continued, and everyone had a good time anyway, even though I wasn't even there.
That's
so
a great community that you built that.
So, and that's my goal for my meetup, is that if I somehow disappear, that it's going to keep on going, and that's what I want to see. But in terms of engagement, we've actually had the opposite situation where, we've had events where people leave when they're ready to leave, and if people want to keep on talking, they keep on talking. Some of us have even gone out for a bite to eat after another something that wasn't even a part of the itinerary, because we just wanted to keep doing stuff. So just because the event says it ends at 6 o'clock doesn't mean you can't keep doing stuff until the end of the 1 a.m. in the morning if you really wanted to.
And do you think this group of members that you've collected in this sense of community is part of your secret sauce, is why they keep attending events?
I'm hopeful. I think there's still ways to go. I think if I were to step back today, I don't know what would happen. I don't know if people would step up to the plate to sort of take it over. But I think that people definitely enjoy the community and this camaraderie. Whether we'll keep having events, I don't know. But I think there's definitely a need and a benefit there that people are getting out of it.
Awesome. In between events, how do you keep your members engaged? I mean, we talked about emailing them, we talked about, posting in Meetup, but what other engagement techniques have you found have worked? Doug?
So we already talked about emailing, and that's a big thing. The other thing is I like to plan at least a meetup and a half ahead. And so one key thing that I do is by the time the current meetup is about to happen, I want the next meetup already on the calendar, so that there's never a point when anyone looks at the meetup and says, future events, nothing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like that's, so I'm always thinking at least 1 or 2 ahead. That way there's always something to look forward to. And that gets back into the other core principle of just know your cadence. Whatever the meetup cadence is that works for your group, just make sure you've got something on the calendar so people can mentally either know about it or book it.
And do you use any other communication tools like Slack, Discord, any of those to communicate with your members in between?
No, that's probably a long conversation. One of the concerns, I've talked about that with one of my co-organizers, and the concern we have is like moderating content is how do you prevent spam and things. And I'm not saying that's an unsolvable problem, but it's just not something that I was willing to invest time in right now. Does that make sense?
Understandable. Yeah,
If it's 20 people that you know personally, okay, fine, you can tell somebody to shut up. But like, how big can can the Slack channel get? And before you start wondering who is that person who's actually, posting such and such.
Yeah. And Max, what about you? What do you do in between events to keep your members engaged?
In terms of platforms, we haven't found good. I mean, part of it is, there's more organizations in our area that use Discord, but it's too much of a learning curve for we have such a diverse age group in our group. We have all ages above 18, and so we have a diverse group of people, and not all of them are as computer savvy, and so that platform doesn't work for everyone. And of course, not everyone's on Facebook, and not everyone's. So finding a platform that everyone uses is really difficult. I think we're lucky because we have such a large user base to draw from, and that we have people who, we have half of our people at events are returning, half of people are new, just through the email list. So we've been able to sustain ourselves that way. But if you're a smaller group, yeah, it's gonna be more tricky as a smaller group where you don't have that base that's established already.
Yeah. And do you have, we talked about Facebook and LinkedIn. Do you have any other communication tools besides email that you've started to, explore a little bit or get any more information on?
Like I said, I did experiment a little bit with some Facebook events and Facebook advertising, but it's not, we've done so well organically that we haven't really had to do that. And we don't really have the budget for that either. Yeah.
What advice would you give to anyone who's thinking about becoming an organizer, but is on the fence? We'll start with you, Maxwell.
So I think, ultimately you got to do, your heart has to be in it. If you want to meet people, if you want to, do things that are fun and be part of a sense of the community, do it. If you're going to do it for you. Don't do it because you have to do it or because people want you to do it, because then it's just it's going to be a mess. So, I think if you value being with other people, then it's a great way to make that happen. And it's sort of opened I think almost like super majority of my friends are from Meetup. So, it can really, and, as an organizer, you're in the center of it. If you like being in the limelight, that's it. And if you're not, it's a good way to learn too, how to sort of open your horizons a little bit. So if that's something that appeals to you, you should do it. And if not, then, that's okay too. But you should do it because your heart's in it.
Doug, is there anything else you want to add?
That's great advice. The other thing is, everything Max said, and not instead, but get you'll grow thick skin. I've been surprised at the number of people that will be willing to complain about free pizza and things like that. It's like, and your initial reactions are to kind of bark back, but you just have to basically just like, is it really worth like having somebody come and then get yelled at, and you're like, oh, you know what, we'll do better next time on that free pizza. Maybe say it just a teeny bit sarcastically, but you don't want to have someone go away with a negative experience. And yeah, just be willing to help. I've been surprised at the number of times I've had to provide parking instructions on a city that people already live in. But you just basically go, okay, maybe they haven't been downtown in a couple of months or years or decades. So I'm gonna I'll tell people, with the 5 nearest parking garages. So just, yeah, you got to have a passion for it, and you got to get a little thick skin and let some things roll off your back, because there are things that just only meetup organizers will understand. The amount of time, like what people see in a meetup is like this, and then there's just mountain of work that happens, and people see like maybe 5% of the actual meetup, if that, in terms of what it takes to prepare a meetup.
But it's great. These communities that you guys build are so appreciative of these, opportunities that you create for them to meet people and understand, hobbies and topics that they love. So it is just amazing, the communities that we've still seen built on this platform. I want to thank you both so much for not only your time, all your great answers, and we are going to get into some questions that have been sent to us. RG asked, can't do food in online meetings, so how do you give incentives for online meetings?
So, do you want to take this, Doug, or are you good? Do you want me to take it?
It's my advice to be the same as I said before. It's just focus on content. Well, at first, what kind of meetup is it? If it's a presentation style meetup, then I think that's more been my experience. If it's a different kind of meetup, like a social meetup, like I don't really have any experience organizing those, and you should ask Max. But if it's a presentation style meetup, then focus on content, and watch your time and respect the speakers in the audience. That's the same thing. It's just make it worth people's time, and then just, your velocity, right? Just keep going as a meetup. If it's if it's sporadically scheduled, you'll get sporadic attendance because you'll surprise people.
And actually, is it okay if I take a question that I see that I want to answer?
Yeah, of course.
So I see one from Peter Beasley. He says, how are you contacting members directly through email? Meetup doesn't provide emails to the people in the group, or is there a way to export them that I'm not aware of? So two things. First, you can send a message through Meetup. You don't see what their email address is, but you can send a message to your email list, or you can send them a personal message, but you still won't see their actual email address. And the other thing is, as I said, with Zoom, is when you have people register, they put their email address in. So once they go to a Zoom session, then you have their email and can use it once they actually attend an event. I also see one from John O'Reilly, co-organizers. Do you make use of co-organizers? What for? How do you recruit a co-organizer?
Max, real quick, before you get to that one, I just want to ask, do you ever utilize a sign-up sheet at events to collect contact information from people?
I haven't, just because we usually have people through, actually one thing we did do is I made name tags for people, all the people who RSVP'd on, used a lot of ink, all the people who RSVP'd on the meetup list. And then when they took the name tag and put it on, I had all the people who didn't come because they didn't take their name tag. So I was able to check off how many people we had. But in terms of email addresses, no, I think if people want to come, they come. If people don't, they don't. I mean, I don't think, I think sometimes you can't force people to do stuff they don't want to do.
Yeah, and let's get into this co-organizer question, because
Yes.
I think that's a great question. So John O'Reilly asks, co-organizers, do you make use of co-organizers? What for, and how do you recruit a co-organizer?
So usually I try to make sure it's someone I trust because they're representing the group. And as the head of the group, you got to make sure that they're representing you, so to speak. But also, I mean, sometimes you could have just someone host one event, and you could actually have someone host an event without them even being an organizer by just making them a host on the event, and they're just backing out of the event yourself. And you just want to make sure it's someone you trust, and that I think that if they've been to a few of your events and you know them and they're interested in helping, I think I have to do a better job of sort of, I can micromanage a little. So letting people sort of take space and do take charge can be important. So.
Yeah, definitely. Doug, have you ever thought of the idea of a co-organizer?
Oh God, yeah, no, I've had one for years. Yeah, it's critical because one person can only do so much. And again, this isn't my full-time job. It seems like it sometimes, but no, I do this as a hobby. And you just need, talking about the sponsor question, it's like that's what the co-organizer can help with. Other speaker ideas, that's what the co-organizer can help with. I mean, and again, 100% with what Max said about somebody that you trust and someone that has the same passion for the topic. But yeah, a single person can only do so much. realistically.
Yeah,
So yeah, everybody needs another friend. It's okay.
definitely. So Dad, Jacoby, any suggestions about how to stop a member from sharing too long? Doing it graciously is a challenge.
Oof.
I'm gonna go to Doug for this one.
So
Doug has been
again,
pretty good with
I
his time.
see the question, but I guess what's the context? So is it a presentation style? Or is it like a social thing? So if it's a presentation style, like I come in Academy Award style, right? Thank you so much. You know, I'm smiling, right? Doesn't have to be mean, but you're basically like, hey, the beeper beeped and everybody knows that this is the time to stop talking. So then we move on. If it's a social thing, like, you know, I don't know, like this is a hard question, right? You know, because there weren't really parameters set up ahead of time that says like that everybody, you know, everybody gets X number of minutes. So I don't know, it's a hard one.
Account, I think, like you said, just graciously trying to keep the time going along and just thanking people and starting to introduce the next person might help. Max, have you ever had an experience where someone just has gone on too long and is like, how do we again?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's very tricky. I think sometimes I kind of redirect it to someone else who hasn't spoken yet, if it's like an online Zoom thing, or try to engage people who haven't spoken as much. I think it's also sort of important to be cognizant when, you know, there's people who are people's gender and people of color when they are being left out, because I think that that's something that happens more often than we probably, if someone who's white and male, probably I don't see, because it's not me. And so I need to sort of realize that more and be more cognizant of that as well. Just taking that into account.
Yeah. So we had an anonymous question come in. In my group event, how do I encourage people to turn on their video and engage? Doug, I know you do more presentation styles, but have you seen any issues of people not wanting their cameras on and engaging over Zoom?
So this is a great question. So the account that we're using is a Linux Foundation account. And they have the panelists have videos, but the attendees do not, because the Linux Foundation found that they were getting Zoom bombed. And so so there's attendees can chat, right? But they can't, there's no voice, there's no audio. So again, it's just a different kind of meetup. It's a presentation style. So people can chat all they want, but the audio and camera on is not an option. And quite frankly, that's not all bad under the circumstances. It's not great. But when you get a group of a certain size, you don't want to have any surprises.
It works for your purpose.
It works for this situation. Yeah.
Max, for any of your online events, have you had issues with people shutting off their cameras or not being engaged?
There was one person, I think, recently, and I think I had a co-organizer who was saying that they were concerned about them being underage or something. So they were concerned they were underage, so I had to sort of remove them from the group. I didn't handle it the best way I should have, but they were kind of being a little, they weren't disengaging from us, and it wasn't clear what was going on. So I had to take some steps there, but I don't have the best answer for that. I'm sorry.
All right. So Jeff Slynn asked, he runs a social group for almost 6 years. For the past year, he's wanted to turn it over to somebody else, yet no one is interested in being an assistant organizer. He has no one, and very few are ever willing to host an event. Any suggestions on how I could do this without bowing out or closing the group? Max, I want to start with you, considering that you took over your group.
I think it's tricky. I think, there was always a chance that the person who had it before me didn't have the best interests of the group at heart. There was a lot of there's a lot of interesting stuff going on before I took over. And so, you never know if you just leave it open, whether someone who, if it's going to be someone good, someone who doesn't have the interest of the group at heart, or whether it's just going to close down. But I think if I was in that situation, I think I've had to step from a few things in life just because I have anxiety and that kind of thing, and I have to ultimately you have to do what's best for you. And if that means taking a step back, then I think it's okay to take a step back. I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but I think it's okay to take care of yourself first. I did see something about membership dues. I think Holly Parker.
Yeah. And Doug, if you want to go through and see if there's any other questions that I didn't catch that you want to make sure we address as well.
Oh, no,
So-
I just wanted to agree with Max's advice of just, hey, if you're getting burned out, then take a step back. I agree with that. In terms of turning it over, yeah, just keep looking for friends, or at least interested people of a similar interest. So, and maybe just put it out there into the group of just ask people, hey, does anybody want to take this over? I'm looking for help. Just keep asking.
Definitely. Max, back to that membership dues question.
Yeah, so Holly Parker asks, how do group dues typically work for meetup groups? Is it acceptable to ask for a small fee to cover special costs related to running the group, especially if the content and value is high? So I don't have membership dues for mine. I actually like to brag about, how big the group is a little bit. So if I do that, then people are going to leave the group. But I also find that there's a value in having new people come. And when you have membership dues, there is like a trial period you can do, but I find that less people join if there's a membership fee. So that I think instead what I do is I charge per event, or you could also ask for contributions through like PayPal or Venmo, like that are voluntary, and I've done some contributions that way as well. So that's one way to do it. And the other one sort of is also about pruning members. And like I said, I think Peter Beasley asked about, is there a way to prune your members? And I like I said, if they're not doing anything, it doesn't really hurt you. So I think that it's nice to be able to say, when you advertise a group, how many members are in it. And even though they're not doing anything, it still looks good.
Yeah. Doug, did you want to touch anything on this point of membership dues? I know you have sponsorships that have helped your group.
This is a great question. So Cleveland Big Data has never charged any membership dues for the same reason of like, hey, if 150 people show up, that's great. That's better than 100. 100 is better than 50. And I always wanted to basically make sure that it's open to anybody. High school students, college students, professionals. And then the other thing is that with the sponsors, that they can pay exactly for the thing that needs to be paid for. I was never in the middle. Does that make sense? There's no Cleveland Big Data bank account. Like that transparency did make it always interesting because it was meetup by meetup planning. But the transparency of, if you ask somebody to pay for the pizza, they know I'm not going to take 10% of something, right? Like, here's a credit card, there's a pizza place, you know exactly where your money's going as a sponsor. And I was never in the middle. And so nobody could ever accuse me of grifting from it. And that was something that was important to me and it seemed to work. And the sponsors seemed to appreciate it is, no one's ever writing a check or a credit card to Doug, it's pizza, it's this or it's that, but it's never to me.
Yeah, definitely. So one last question for today. Anonymous wrote in, hi there. I'm struggling with my motivation to host events online because it takes time and energy. What keeps the event organizers motivated to keep going? And I'm sorry, we are over a few minutes, but I just really wanted to hit that question. I know community motivates us, but just if there's one last thing you guys wanted to throw in about that.
Fear of failure is always a good one. Of like, I put in a lot of years of effort on this, and I'm not willing to stop until I'm ready. so like I just refuse to stop until I feel like turning it over. At some point I'm going to have to, but I don't feel like stopping now. So I'm not going to.
Definitely. Max?
No, I think, just think about, people you're gonna be interactive with after you plan the event. The success is gonna be being with people, but then also the planning of it can, I don't know, try to, if there's some way to make the planning of it fun too, like, oh, I got to figure this out. You're learning, think about all the stuff you're learning about how to run an event. Like I didn't know about all these tricks, 2 years ago, so it's a learning process, and learning in itself sometimes can be something that can get you to motivate, you're learning how to do something new.
I think also like back to that drive of community. Our communities are really what we do this for, and that sense of being a part of something, I think could help motivate people.
And also get help too. I mean, like, get a co-organizer. And again, I hate, because sometimes, organizing could feel like, oh my God, this is so much work. I can't pull it off. Like having somebody to bounce ideas off of or do things, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if it's somebody that's only doing, a little bit, that's a little bit that you're not doing. And so you feel like you're in it together with, instead of just doing it by yourself. So.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys again so much for joining us today. I've had such a great time, having these conversations with you guys. Maxwell, Doug, it has been great getting to know you and getting some insights about your group. I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.